quiet U.S. airport, an elderly Native American couple carried a box of sacred eagle feathers, bound for a cultural fair in Germany. But when a canine named Blaze stopped them, what he found would unravel a global smuggling network using cultural respect as a cover for laundering stolen artifacts. This wasn't fiction. This happened. Stay with me through the story, and if you value real stories that reveal hidden truths, please like this video and subscribe for more. And tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. It was an ordinary Wednesday morning at Albuquerque International Sunport. The kind of morning when TSA agents moved on muscle memory, their eyes flicking from screen to screen, their bodies slightly stiff from too many hours on their feet. The flow of passengers was steady but unremarkable. A mix of business travelers clutching briefcases, families herding restless children toward vacation gates, and the occasional student with a heavy backpack and sleepy eyes. Officer Amelia Grant had worked here for almost 8 years. At 36, she carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen enough to know that appearances were never the whole story. Her German Shepherd partner Blaze had been with her for 4 of those years. A canine originally trained for currency and document detection, Blaze had developed an uncanny nose for the faint chemical traces left on forged or tampered materials. He was also unusually calm. Nothing rattled him without reason. At 9:12 a.m., an older couple approached the primary security screening lane. The man looked to be in his 70s, his long gray braid tucked neatly beneath a worn felt hat. His partner, a woman of similar age, wore a simple denim jacket adorned with beadwork that shimmered subtly when she moved. Both carried themselves with a quiet dignity. In the man's hands was a wooden box, carefully wrapped in a soft cloth with patterns reminiscent of traditional Pueblo design. The TSA officer at the initial checkpoint flagged the item for secondary screening, not out of suspicion but because of its size and the fact that it was a solid object. When asked, the man spoke softly. "It contains ceremonial eagle feathers. For a religious gathering in Frankfurt," he explained, sliding a laminated document across the counter. The paperwork was in order. Under the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, the transport of eagle feathers for legitimate religious purposes was protected, though such items still required inspection to comply with international customs laws. Amelia watched the interaction from a distance. Something about the couple struck her, perhaps the way the man's fingers trembled slightly, or the woman's eyes darted between the agents and her husband. Nerves were common in airports, especially for elders unaccustomed to flying, but this was different. She gave Blaze a subtle cue and led him toward the secondary screening station. The older man unwrapped the box with reverence. Inside, layers of rich brown and white feathers lay neatly arranged, interspersed with small lengths of sinew and polished beads. Blaze sat quietly at first, his posture relaxed but attentive. Amelia spoke softly to the couple. "I'm going to have my partner do a quick check. It won't harm anything." The man nodded solemnly. "Of course." Blaze approached the box, nose working the air in small, precise circles. At first, nothing unusual, but then a subtle shift. The dog's ears pricked forward. His breathing quickened slightly. A soft whine escaped him, followed by a sharp, decisive bark. He pawed once at the edge of the box, then sat back on his haunches, staring at Amelia. She felt a prickle at the base of her neck. Blaze was never wrong, never. And this wasn't a reaction to organic material like feathers. It was the distinct alert he gave when detecting certain chemical residues, often found in treated counterfeit documents or specially prepared papers. Amelia kept her voice steady. "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to need to take a closer look at what's inside, for your protection as well as ours." The woman's face paled. The man's grip tightened on the edge of the table. "It's just feathers," he whispered. But the look in his eyes said more, an undercurrent of fear, of something beyond their control. Amelia gently lifted the top layer of feathers. Nestled between the plumes were several thin sheaths of what appeared to be aged parchment, laminated and pressed so thin they almost disappeared against the wood grain of the box. Blaze gave another soft bark, eyes locked on the hidden documents. Amelia called for her supervisor. "We need a forensic tech down here now." As the box was carefully removed for examination, the older couple stood to the side, their hands clasped tightly. The woman whispered urgently to her husband, her voice trembling. "They said it was safe. They promised it was safe. Amelia heard the words and felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Whoever they were, this couple had been used. Of that she was now certain. But by whom? And for what purpose? Blaze sat beside her, tail still, eyes bright. The faint scent of treated paper lingered in the air, a trace of something that didn't belong in a box of sacred feathers. Later, as the forensic team began their careful analysis, Amelia stood watching through the observation window. Under UV light, the thin sheets revealed faint watermarks, European heraldic symbols, inconsistent with Native American religious materials. Preliminary tests suggested the documents were modern forgeries, possibly intended to simulate proven certificates for smuggled artifacts. The implications were staggering. For a moment, Amelia allowed herself to lean against the cool glass, exhaling slowly. This was no random case of an overzealous elder packing the wrong papers. It was deliberate, calculated, and if these documents had made it through, how many others already had? She glanced down at Blaze. "Good boy," she murmured, stroking his head. The dog gave a soft chuff, eyes watchful. Somewhere out there, someone had thought they could use a vulnerable pair of elders as unwitting couriers. And they'd nearly succeeded. But not today. Not this time. As Amelia prepared her report, she couldn't shake the questions spinning in her mind. Who was behind this operation? How extensive was it? And most importantly, had this been an isolated attempt? Or was it part of a much larger pattern? One thing was certain. This was no longer just about a box of feathers. The hunt had begun. Amelia stood in the observation room watching through the pane of reinforced glass as the forensic technician began his work. The older couple had been escorted to a nearby interview room under the watch of 2 agents, not yet detained but clearly under scrutiny. Amelia's supervisor, Deputy Chief Larry Monroe, joined her. Eyes narrowed as he observed the carefully staged table where the wooden box now sat opened and exposed. "Have we got so far?" Monroe asked, his tone low. Blaze alerted twice, both times consistent with chemical residues. Amelia replied, not taking her eyes off the technician's careful hands. At first glance it looked like a ceremonial box, but there are thin sheets layered between the feathers. Mara frowned. "Intentional placement?" "No doubt," she said. The forensic tech, a wiry young man named Ethan Cho, had already donned a fresh pair of gloves. With tweezers, he lifted the first of the suspicious sheets. To the naked eye, they appeared to be aged parchment, their surface dull beneath the overhead lights. But under the magnifier, the truth became clearer. Each sheet was thin, nearly translucent, but had a slight waxy coating as if deliberately treated to resist moisture and degradation. Amelia leaned closer, noting how the edges of the paper showed subtle curling, a telltale sign that they'd been compressed under weight, possibly to simulate age. "Run the UV," she instructed softly. Ethan complied, adjusting the wavelength carefully. As the light passed over the first sheet, faint symbols emerged, filigree patterns and faded script that had no place among sacred feathers. Monroe muttered under his breath, "Well, that's no tribal document." Amelia's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice level. "These look like certificates of provenance," she said. "Fake ones. The kind used to launder stolen artifacts," she read. Ethan nodded. "And look here," he adjusted the magnifier, zooming in on the upper corner of one sheet. A faint circular watermark appeared, partially obscured but still recognizable to the trained eye. Amelia felt a jolt of recognition. "That's the Salzburg pattern," she said. Monroe turned sharply. "The Austrian one?" "Yeah, it's a known counterfeit mark, used a lot in the mid-2000s, before the big EU crackdown," Amelia explained. "Whoever made this either had access to old stock or has revived the template," Ethan added. "The wax coating is probably to avoid triggering some chemical test, but it's imperfect." Blaze picked it up anyway. Amelia couldn't suppress a grim smile. "Good dog." Monroe rubbed his chin. "If these documents are what they appear to be, this is bigger than just an elderly couple smuggling trinkets." "They probably didn't even know," Amelia said quietly. She had seen the look in the woman's eyes, fear, not guilt. "Someone used them as mules." Ethan carefully lifted another sheet. Between each layer of feathers, more documents were hidden, 6 sheets in total. Each bore variations of the same forged watermark. along with fake signatures and stamps purporting to come from various European museums and cultural institutions. "You'll need to cross a knees with Interpol's database," Amelia said. "There's a pattern here, the use of Salzburg watermarks, layered with traditional materials to evade suspicion. It's methodical." Monroe nodded. "You take point, and keep that couple isolated until we figure out exactly what they know." Amelia hesitated. "They deserve to know they're being used." Monroe gave her a sidelong glance. "In time, for now I want answers." Back in the observation room, Amelia called for additional support. Agents from Customs and Border Protection with experience in cultural property trafficking. She also requested a translator, not for language but for cultural context. She wanted a liaison who understood the significance of the feathers and could help navigate the delicate line between enforcement and respect for indigenous practices. As she waited, she pulled out her phone and accessed the agency's internal database. A quick search confirmed her suspicion. Several shipments flagged in the past year had involved similar materials. Ceremonial items used to mass contraband. The common thread? Each had been routed through small regional airports where oversight was lighter, agents less experienced. "They're exploiting cultural protections," Amelia said aloud, voice tight. "Counting on us to hesitate out of respect." Monroe glanced at her, and they almost pulled it off. In the adjoining interview room, the older couple sat side by side, hands still clasped. Through the one-way mirror, Amelia could see the woman whispering to her husband. Their faces were etched with worry, exhaustion creeping in. "Do we know who gave them the box?" Monroe asked. "Not yet," Amelia replied, "but I'll find out." A knock on the door signaled the arrival of the liaison, a soft-spoken Native American cultural advisor named Daniel Yazzie. Amelia briefed him quickly, outlining the evidence found so far and the need for a sensitive approach. "You're likely innocent," she said, "but we need the truth." Daniel nodded solemnly. "I'll speak with them." As he entered the interview room, Amelia returned to the observation station. Her gaze flicked back to the forensic table where the last of the documents had been laid out in sequence. The pattern was clear: someone was running a sophisticated laundering operation, and they had no qualms about exploiting sacred traditions to do it. Blaze sat quietly at her side, eyes alert. Amelia reached down to stroke his head. "Good work today," she murmured. But even as she spoke, her mind raced ahead. Who was behind this? How many shipments had already slipped through unnoticed? And most importantly, what were they funding with the profits? As Daniel began speaking softly to the couple, a message from Customs. One of the watermarks matches documents recovered in a recent seizure in Antwerp. Possible connection to known trafficking network. Amelia's pulse quickened. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something bigger, much bigger, and they were only just beginning to peel back the first layer. Amelia's fingers moved swiftly over her phone's screen as she pulled up the message from Customs again. The match to a watermark from a prior seizure in Antwerp was more than a red flag, it was a signal flare. She immediately flagged the forensic images to Interpol's cultural goods database, adding a note requesting expedited analysis. Ethan Cho, meanwhile, continued cataloging the recovered sheets under high magnification photography. "Got something else," he called softly. Amelia stepped closer. "Look at the text on this one." Under the magnifier, the faint words became legible. Certificado de Excavación Legal, Ministerio de Cultura del Perú. Amelia's heart skipped. Peruvian excavation certificate. Ethan nodded grimly. Supposedly legit, but look closer. He zoomed in on the lower margin where a blurred governmental seal should have been crisp and embossed. Instead, it showed pixelation. Classic digital forgery. "This is a scanned copy of a seal, not an original impression," Ethan confirmed. "And this paper stock isn't used by Peruvian ministries. It's European." Amelia's mind was already racing. Peru's cultural artifacts had been a hot target for traffickers over the past decade, particularly items from Moche, Inca, and Chachapoya sites. Following tighter security in Peru and direct flights to Europe, smugglers had adapted, moving contraband through North America, masking it with layers of cultural legitimacy. Now, it seemed, they were using Native American ceremonial exports as the latest camouflage. "Cross-check all 6 sheets," Amelia instructed. "See if they referenced the same dig site." Ethan scanned the remaining documents one by one. "They do. All list an excavation sitio Q supposedly authorized in 2019 near Trujillo. Amelia frowned. There's no such authorized site, she said, pulling up her own quick search on the Peruvian Ministry's public records. Nothing with that name. Monroe entered the lab again, jaw tight. Customs confirmed. Sitio Q is a known fictitious entry used in multiple seizures over the past 3 years, primarily linked to a trafficking ring based in Spain. Amelia exhaled slowly. Then we're looking at a European destination and distribution network. Frankfurt makes sense, major hub with multiple artifact markets and galleries. She checked her watch. You need to question the couple now. Daniel Yazzie had already spent the past 20 minutes easing the elderly couple's anxiety, building trust. When Amelia and Monroe entered the interview room, the couple looked up, faces etched with fatigue and worry. The man's name was Samuel Greyhawk, his wife Elena Greyhawk. Both were enrolled members of a Pueblo nation in northern New Mexico. Mr. and Mrs. Greyhawk, Elena began softly, taking a seat across from them. You've examined the box and its contents. Along with your feathers, we found documents that are not what they appear to be. Samuel's face clouded with confusion. Documents? Yes, Amelia said gently. Certificates claiming to authorize the excavation of cultural artifacts from Peru. We believe these are counterfeit and part of a smuggling operation. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. No, you didn't know. We didn't put anything like that in there. Samuel looked stricken. We were asked to bring the box. That's all. Monroe's voice was firm but not harsh. By whom? Samuel's gaze dropped. Our son, he said quietly. Nathan. Daniel spoke softly. Tell us everything you can about how this came to you. Samuel nodded slowly. Nathan called us 2 weeks ago, said he was involved in helping organize a cultural exchange in Germany. He told us there would be a special event at a large folk art fair in Frankfurt, a chance to display traditional Pueblo ceremonies. He asked if we could bring a feather bundle for him. He said it would be too expensive to ship and that carrying it personally would be more secure. We didn't question him. Elena's voice broke. He brought the box to us 2 days ago, already packed. He said not to open it, that it was prepared with care. Did you? Amelia asked. Samuel shook his head. No, we trusted him. Amelia's mind churned. The timeline fit. Nathan Greyhawk, likely unaware, perhaps under pressure, had inserted forged documents beneath legitimate ceremonial materials, using his parents as unwitting couriers. The tactic was cold, effective, and cruel. Where is your son now? Monroe asked. Samuel hesitated. He told us he was flying separately, that he would meet us in Frankfurt after we cleared customs. Amelia exchanged a glance with Monroe. This was textbook courier work, keep the mule separated from the trafficker to reduce risk. Daniel leaned forward. Do you know how Nathan became involved with this event? Samuel's shoulders slumped. He said he'd met some people online through an organization that promotes indigenous arts globally. He sounded proud, said he was helping spread awareness. Amelia's heart ached at the naivete and the manipulation Nathan had likely suffered. Did he mention who these people were? She pressed. Samuel shook his head. Only that they had sponsors in Europe and could arrange everything. Monroe stood, his expression unreadable. We'll need your son's contact information, and we may need to place both of you on a hold order to prevent departure until we sort this out. Nada's eyes brimmed with tears. We didn't want any of this. We thought we were helping. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We believe you, but now we need your help. Amelia rose slowly. Thank you for your honesty. We'll do everything we can to find out who did this. As they exited the interview room, Monroe spoke quietly. Get me everything on Nathan Greyhawk. Cell records, financials, travel history. If he's in bed with these traffickers, I want to know yesterday. Amelia nodded, her mind already racing ahead. The layers were peeling back fast. What had started as an odd canine alert had now cracked open a conduit for illegal Peruvian artifacts flowing into Europe, all masked under the guise of cultural exchange. And somewhere out there, Nathan Greyhawk, or those using him, were counting on this shipment making it through. Amelia clenched her jaw. Not this time. The room was charged with a quiet intensity as Amelia returned to her desk, the interview with the Greyhawks replaying in her mind. The The picture was becoming clearer but also more troubling. Nathan Greyhawk had almost certainly inserted the forged documents, yet the couple themselves remained unaware and deeply shaken. Now, the next step was to locate Nathan and determine how deeply he was entangled. Amelia tapped into the agency's shared case management system and requested a full background pull on Nathan Greyhawk. Within minutes, the first dataset arrived. Nathan, 34 years old, had a registered address in Albuquerque, a modest apartment near the University District. A second scan revealed that his landlord had reported no tenant activity for over 6 months. Rent paid sporadically via an online payment service. No verified sightings, no utilities usage suggesting occupancy. A quick cross-check with local law enforcement flagged Nathan as a subject of interest in an ongoing investigations, led by Homeland Security Investigations, HSI Cybercrimes Division. The case file was marked sensitive, but Amelia had the clearance to view the summary. The allegations were stark: suspected involvement in an online marketplace trafficking in cultural artifacts, with links to European buyers and distributors. Transactions traced through multiple crypto wallets had shown movement of high-value items, including pre-Columbian artifacts across borders. The HSI file noted that while Nathan had not yet been charged, he was considered a person of interest in an active sting operation targeting the broader network. Amelia leaned back, tension knotting in her shoulders. Nathan wasn't just naive, he was deep in dangerous territory. Whether coerced or complicit remained to be seen. She picked up the phone and dialed Agent Victor Serrano, the HSI case lead listed on the file. Serrano came the voice on the other end. "This is Amelia Grant, TSA Investigations at Albuquerque International. I think we've just intercepted a live shipment connected to your artifact trafficking case. Name's Nathan Greyhawk." A pause. "Go on," Serrano said, voice sharpened. Amelia summarized the details of the intercepted box. The forged Perobius certificates. "You've confirmed." Nathan provided the box, told them not to open it, and intended to meet them in Frankfurt. Serrano exhaled. "That fits. We've been tracking his crypto wallet activity linked to recent artifact sales. We know he was in contact with a European buyer 2 weeks ago, but we've lost eyes on him. Hasn't been home, burner phones only. We were hoping he'd resurface through a new shipment." Amelia's mind raced. "We've also got a possible lead on a middleman. The parents say Nathan dropped the box off 2 days ago, but I'm betting he used someone else to do it." Serrano's tone was grim. "That wouldn't surprise me. These networks are compartmentalized. Mules rarely interact directly with the primary smugglers." Amelia hung up and immediately requested airport security pull surveillance footage for the past 72 hours, from all entry points. In parallel, she placed a priority request with the Regional Fusion Center for any traffic camera footage around the Greyhawk's known travel route. It took less than an hour for results to trickle in. First, an analysis of transit system records confirmed that Samuel and Elena Greyhawk had arrived in Albuquerque by intercity bus 2 days before their scheduled flight, checked in at a modest downtown motel. More importantly, external camera footage from the city's main interstate bus terminal, where the couple had been seen entering, revealed a critical moment. At 2:14 p.m. on the day of their arrival, a male subject wearing a baseball cap and nondescript clothing approached the Greyhawks in the terminal waiting area, carrying a duffel bag. The time-stamped footage showed him handing the bag to Samuel, engaging in brief conversation, and then departing alone. The duffel bag matched the cloth wrapping used around the ceremonial box intercepted at the airport. Facial recognition on the male subject returned no direct match in government databases, but secondary analysis flagged him from a separate investigation 6 months earlier, an individual suspected of acting as a courier in a domestic artifact laundering operation. Amelia's pulse quickened. "Got him," she muttered, flagging the clip for immediate sharing with HSI. The timestamp and location confirmed that Nathan had likely used an intermediary to pass the box to his parents, insulating himself further from direct involvement. Cross-referencing travel records revealed that no passenger ticket had been purchased under Nathan's name for any flights departing Albuquerque or nearby airports within the past month. He was either using false ID or relying on ground transport. Banking data further revealed recent cash withdrawals from ATMs in Santa Fe, suggesting he remained in the region but was moving cautiously. Serrano responded quickly to the surveillance update. "That's our courier. We've seen him before. He's known to work for a mid-tier broker who connects local suppliers to European buyers." The fact that he handled the handoff means Nathan's fully embedded. Amelia's mind churned. The handoff at the bus terminal painted a picture of deliberate distance. Nathan using his parents' trust as cover while avoiding personal exposure. Worse, the presence of a known courier indicated a wider network at play. She relayed the new findings to Monroe. "Nathan's address is cold, but he's active. He's using local intermediaries and he's connected to an active European trafficking line. If his parents had cleared customs in Frankfurt, those forged certificates would have legitimized any matching artifacts already staged in Europe." Monroe's jaw tightened. "You're running a complete supply chain, fake provenance to match real stolen goods. Once the items hit European auction houses, they're virtually untouchable." Amelia's mind flashed to the worried faces of Samuel and Elena Greyhawk. The depth of the betrayal they'd unknowingly facilitated was staggering. "We need to find Nathan before he vanishes entirely." In parallel, Fusion Center analysts pinged another match. Security footage from a Santa Fe gas station 2 days prior showed Nathan himself, identifiable through partial facial recognition, refueling an older sedan. License plate readers confirmed the vehicle belonged to a rental agency, paid in cash, no electronic trail beyond the initial contract. The vehicle had not yet been returned. Serrano was already coordinating with state police to widen the net, but the window was closing fast. Amelia tapped her fingers against the edge of her desk. The operation was moving with frightening sophistication. Local couriers, cultural camouflage, cross-bedroom laundering, and Nathan Greyhawk was a keystone link now on the run. The steady hum of fluorescent lights in Amelia's office did nothing to ease the weight pressing against her chest as she reviewed the latest intel from HSI. The case was widening rapidly, and Nathan Greyhawk's vanishing act only heightened the urgency. Across the room, Blaze lay at her feet, his calm presence grounding her as she sifted through the avalanche of data streaming. Serrano had delivered a new report, a recent analytical brief on forged provenance documents linked to online auction platforms. The report detailed 3 major incidents in the past 8 months, where items had surfaced on respected European art auction sites, each accompanied by near-identical certificados documents traced back to the same fictitious sitio in Peru. In each case, the items had been laundered into legitimacy by matching the fake certificates to smuggled artifacts already in European possession, their origins obscured through complex transit routes. Amelia's gaze locked onto the report's key sentence. "Emerging pattern suggests a structured laundering pipeline, utilizing US-based mules and native ceremonial shipments as cover." The implications chilled her. The box intercepted from the Greyhawks was not an isolated attempt. It was one node in a sprawling transnational operation. She paged through the attached auction records. The first sale, a gold Moshe funerary mask, had fetched €180,000, 0 cents. The second, a Chachapoya textile, €75,000, cents, each accompanied by documentation bearing the Salzburg watermark and false Peruvian ministry credentials. Serrano's notes confirmed that 2 of the 3 auction houses had unknowingly facilitated the sales, later cooperating fully once the fraud was exposed. But the third house remained opaque, its ownership structure shielded behind offshore entities. Amelia's stomach tightened. Someone was profiting handsomely from the trade, exploiting legal gray areas and the aura of legitimacy granted by forged paperwork. A secondary note in the report caught her attention. Recent intercepts suggest network expanding scope beyond South American artifacts to include Native American cultural items, primarily pottery, jewelry, and ceremonial objects, targeting high-demand European collectors. Amelia leaned forward, heart racing. The pattern was worse than she feared. The network wasn't merely laundering Peruvian heritage, it had begun targeting the sacred cultural patrimony of U.S. Native community. The thought ignited a fresh surge of anger. Such items were protected under stringent federal laws, their export tightly restricted. Yet the allure of European markets, where buyers prized exotic artifacts with unverifiable provenance, made them an irresistible target. She quickly pulled the latest seizure reports from U.S. Customs. Over the past year, 5 incidents had flagged attempts to smuggle native artifacts through indirect routing. items declared as tribal crafts or ceremonial reproductions, destined for European private buyers. In each case, documentation traced back to online sellers operating through encrypted forums and boutique auction platforms. Amelia's fingers flew across her keyboard as she accessed Interpol's cultural property watch list. Multiple alerts underscored the growing trend: native pottery, woven textiles, feathered regalia, surfacing in European markets alongside South American antiquities. A transatlantic web was emerging, its strands connecting smugglers, forgers, corrupt intermediaries, and unwitting couriers. She flagged the trend analysis for Monroe. Moments later, he strode into her office, jaw set. "I've seen the report," he said without preamble. "They're going after our own heritage now." Amelia nodded grimly. "It's bigger than we thought. The same watermark pattern, the same laundering strategy. They're using the same courier pipelines. If we hadn't intercepted the Greyhawk's box, those forged certificates would have been used to legitimize native artifacts already in Europe." Monroe paced, tension radiating from him. "And we've got no firm lead on the leadership structure." "Not yet," Amelia said. "But Nathan Greyhawk's involvement gives us a thread. He was likely recruited as a mid-level facilitator. He knew enough to coordinate handoffs, but insulated himself through intermediaries." Blaze stirred at her feet as she scanned the latest encrypted marketplace scrape provided by HSI's cyber unit. Listings for authentic Native American ceremonial objects had surged in recent weeks. Coded language indicating items smuggled through compromised channels. One vendor even advertised full provenance included, a veiled reference to forged certificates like those from City OQ. The overlap was unmistakable. The network's model was elegant in its ruthlessness. Acquire artifacts through theft, illicit excavation, or coercion. Fabricate provenance. Route through US-based cultural cover shipments. Sell to European collectors whose due diligence rarely pierced the fraud. Amelia's blood simmered. The cultural violation was profound. Artifacts sacred to living communities reduced to commodities in a global trafficking game. A fresh message pinged in from Serrano. Just intercepted chat logs between known intermediary and European buyer. References upcoming native shipment to Frankfurt. Possible matching with Greyhawk's box. Amelia's pulse quickened. The pieces were aligning. The Frankfurt fair Nathan had referenced was likely a cover event. An opportunity to synchronize physical shipments with forged paperwork. Flooding the market with newly laundered items. "You need to alert German authorities," she told Monroe. "They're about to be hit with a wave of artifacts legitimized by these fakes." Monroe nodded. "I'll coordinate with the attaché. You keep digging here." Amelia returned to her screen, scanning digital trails. The network's sophistication was evolving. Initial analysis suggested convergence between legacy European art crime groups and newer US-based cyber-facilitated smugglers. A hybrid model exploiting both physical and digital infrastructure. The recruitment of Native American facilitators, witting or not, add a layer of moral exploitation that sickened her, and the auctions lent an air of respectability that masked the theft of history itself. As she prepared her next briefing, another alert flashed. A known forger recently flagged in a Los Angeles customs seizure had ties to both Peruvian and native artifact laundering. The same watermark variant. The same shipment patterns. Amelia's breath caught. The spider at the center of the web might be closer than they thought. She leaned in, heart pounding, as Blaze shifted beside her. Amelia's office was now a hive of activity. Analysts worked alongside CBP officers and HSI agents, piecing together a puzzle that grew more disturbing with each new discovery. The latest forensic analyses confirmed what had already been suspected. The use of ceremonial eagle feathers as a smuggling cover wasn't an opportunistic choice by Nathan Greyhawk. It was a calculated tactic employed by a network that understood both the cultural sensitivities and procedural blind spots of international air travel. The feathers were authentic, legally protected under the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, a fact that usually prompted TSA agents to treat such shipments with a high degree of deference and caution. Amelia reviewed past training modules. Officers were specifically instructed to handle such items with respect, to avoid unnecessary disturbance, unless clear contraband indicators were present. It was a vulnerability, one that traffickers had now weaponized. As Amelia updated her case notes, a new report arrived from the TSA Office of Inspections. It was a retrospective analysis of anomalous seizures involving Native American ceremonial items over the past 12 months. The findings were damning. 6 confirmed incidents had been recorded across various U.S. airports, each involving elderly Native individuals or young students transporting feather bundles, ceremonial masks, or traditional pottery. In 4 of those cases, forged provenance documents had been discovered concealed within the shipments after secondary inspection, usually triggered not by initial canine alerts, but by customs holds at European ports of entry. The pattern was clear. Traffickers were systematically recruiting vulnerable or trusting members of Native communities to carry contraband under the guise of cultural exchange or family honor. Amelia's stomach turned. She convened an emergency call with Agent Serrano and CBP's Cultural Property Program Manager. "They've identified our procedural blind spot," she said bluntly, "and they're exploiting it through our own values of cultural respect. Every time we hesitate to fully inspect these items, we give them a window." Serrano agreed grimly. "You're counting on the stigma around disrespecting Native heritage to keep us cautious. And they've targeted exactly the right profiles: elders, students, people less likely to arouse suspicion and more likely to trust those exploiting them." CBP confirmed that in each prior incident, the couriers had been recruited through community outreach fronts, purported nonprofit groups offering to sponsor cultural exchange opportunities abroad. In reality, these fronts were thinly veiled trafficking conduits, providing travel stipends and covering transport costs in exchange for the honor of representing Native culture overseas. Amelia's blood boiled. She asked for full profiles on the 6 prior courier cases. The parallels to the Greyhawks experience were chilling. In each instance, the couriers had been approached by a charismatic intermediary, someone posing as a cultural liaison or arts promoter, often leveraging weak personal ties to the community. They'd been assured their participation would help raise awareness of Native traditions in Europe, and that their ceremonial items would be honored and displayed appropriately. The common thread: in every case, they were instructed not to open or inspect the shipment prior to travel, with reassurances that everything had been prepared according to cultural protocols. Amelia's fingers curled into fists. She pulled up the internal watch list of suspected trafficking facilitators operating domestically. One name surfaced repeatedly: Elias Moreau, a French-American with a history of involvement in dubious art dealings and a reputation for cultivating relationships within vulnerable cultural communities. Moreau was believed to have operated out of Santa Fe for the past 2 years, offering Native arts consulting services and hosting poorly documented cultural exchange workshops. He had no verifiable tribal affiliations. Amelia sent a priority request to HSI's Santa Fe field office: locate and monitor Moreau immediately. Meanwhile, an updated metadata scan of encrypted marketplace listings revealed a disturbing trend. The volume of Native American artifact listings had spiked sharply over the past 3 quarters, correlating with the timeline of the courier incidents. The artifacts were being bundled with forged certificates, crafted to mimic tribal stewardship documents, or falsely issued by fictitious nonprofit entities. The strategy mirrored the South American artifact laundering playbook, but with a chilling cultural twist. Amelia briefed Monroe on the findings. "They're not just selling stolen heritage. They're turning our own protections into their cover." Monroe's expression was grim. "And they're embedding this process into the cultural economy itself. Once elders and students participate even unknowingly, it undermines trust and fractures community relationships." Amelia nodded. "It's cultural violence as much as financial crime." She proposed an immediate escalation: launch a joint TSA-CBP-I task force focused specifically on Native artifact trafficking, with targeted community outreach to disrupt recruitment pipelines and provide education on the risks. Meanwhile, the search for Nathan Greyhawk intensified. Fusion Center data now suggested he'd been in contact with 2 prior courier cases, both young Native students recruited through Santa Fe's art scene. The pattern solidified. Moreau's network was leveraging trusted cultural figures to reach potential couriers, framing the trafficking as a noble act of cultural sharing. Serrano's team recovered chat logs between Moreau and an unidentified European buyer referencing an upcoming shipment from the elders, likely the Greyhawk's intercepted box. Amelia's jaw tightened. The layers of manipulation ran deep. She reviewed the Greyhawk's interview transcript again, noting Samuel's pride when he had spoken of Nathan's involvement in helping our culture be seen abroad. The heartbreak of betrayal was palpable. Amelia made a mental note. Any community outreach would need to address not just the legal risks, but the emotional manipulation being weaponized against the couriers. She compiled a list of tribal liaison contacts to coordinate with, ensuring the message would come from trusted voices within the communities, not just law enforcement. As she prepared the first draft of the task force's public advisory, a new alert pinged on her screen. HSI had identified another imminent courier flight flagged for secondary inspection. The courier, an elder from the Hopi community, carrying a ceremonial Kiva mask consigned for exhibition in Berlin. The shipment profile matched the same pattern. The network was still operating and accelerating. Amelia's mind was moving faster than her fingers could type as she finalized the task force advisory draft. The urgency to shut down the trafficking network was mounting, but so was the need to understand exactly how the forged documents had evaded detection for so long. Blaze had given the first clue when he'd alerted on the Greyhawk's box, reacting not to the organic materials of the feathers, but to something else, something chemical. Amelia requested a full chemical analysis of the seized forged certificates, coordinating with the TSA Explosives and Chemical Analysis section. The report came back faster than expected. Under gas chromatography mass spectrometry, the paper fibers tested positive for trace amounts of ammonium chloride, a compound often used as a component in certain types of ink fixatives and paper aging treatments. More interestingly, the UV spectroscopy scan revealed distinct chemical signatures from optical brighteners and UV reactive dyes, commonly used in counterfeit watermark production. Amelia reread the keyline, combined presence of ammonium chloride residues and UV reactive compounds, suggests deliberate treatment of paper to simulate age and authenticity, while facilitating hidden verification markers for trusted buyers. In other words, the network wasn't just forging documents, they were chemically engineering them for multi-layered deception. Blaze had reacted to the residual scent of ammonium chloride, a compound not native to untreated parchment or ceremonial boxes. His sensitivity had picked up what human screening and even standard chemical sniffers had missed. Amelia bent down and scratched the base of Blaze's ears. "You're worth your weight in gold, buddy," she murmured. She compiled the chemical profile and pushed it to TSA's National Canine Program. Within hours, an emergency alert was issued to all canine units with document detection training. The alert instructed handlers to retrain and test their dogs for ammonium chloride detection, and provided the UV reactive compound signature for reference. The goal? Begin proactive screening of outbound shipments containing ceremonial items or declared cultural goods. Amelia coordinated with the National Targeting Center to retroactively flag recent exports matching the Greyhawk's shipment profile. A cross-check of outbound cargo manifests revealed several candidates, now scheduled for secondary screening at partner airports. 2 days later, the first hit came in from Chicago Hare. A K-9 unit flagged a wooden crate declared as tribal ceremonial artifacts, bound for Paris. Upon inspection, it contained a selection of native pottery and woven textiles, accompanied by forged stewardship certificates bearing identical UV reactive dyes and ammonium chloride traces. Hours later, a second seizure was reported at Miami International, a large feathered headdress and carved masks consigned for shipment to Brussels, with the same telltale chemical markers present. Amelia stared at the reports, adrenaline surging. The network's scope was even broader than anticipated, spanning coast to coast and routing through multiple exit points to complicate interdiction. She called Monroe immediately. "We've got 2 new hits, O'Hare and Miami. Both match the chemical profile Blaze triggered on." Monroe's voice was flagged, and both were flagged because of Blaze's alert pattern. "Exactly," Amelia confirmed. "His initial reaction gave us the key. Now we're seeing how widespread the pipeline is." Monroe exhaled. "You need to alert the entire international network. Interpol, Europol, German customs, everyone. They'll be receiving these shipments soon if we don't move." Amelia was already drafting the intelligence bulletin. Within the hour, an international alert was distributed, warning partner agencies of the new chemical indicators and the trafficking methodology exploiting native ceremonial protections. The bulletin included images of the Greyhawk's seized documents, annotated with the UTHIG signature patterns, and detailed the use of ammonium chloride as a detectable marker. Amelia returned to the forensic lab to speak with Ethan Cho, whose work had proven pivotal. "I need you to expand your screening," she told him. "Run the same chemical analysis on prior seizures we've cataloged in the past year. Any artifact shipment, even ones we thought clean." Ethan nodded, already pulling up archived samples. "We'll prioritize the last 6 months," he said. "If the same markers show up, we'll map the spread." Hours later, preliminary results came in. Multiple archived cases revealed faint but consistent traces of the same chemical markers. Some shipments had cleared TSA but were later flagged by European customs. Others had slipped through entirely, now presumed sold. The web of laundering was becoming starkly visible. Meanwhile, Fusion Center analysis of financial data traced crypto wallet flows linked to prior flagged shipments. The pattern pointed to a European laundering hub using a constellation of shell companies to obscure buyer identities. Serrano briefed Amelia. "They're briefing millions through this network, Grant, and they've professionalized the courier model." Amelia nodded grimly. "They've engineered their documents to beat both visual and initial chemical screening. If not for Blaze's reaction, we'd still be in the dark." Serrano added, "We're coordinating with German customs now. Their Frankfurt team is prepping for increased screening ahead of the fair Nathan referenced." Amelia's pulse quickened. The window to intercept live shipments was narrowing. Blaze's role had become central. His alert had not only exposed the chemical signature but had triggered a cascading international response now reverberating across enforcement channels. Yet the network remained active, and the intelligence flow suggested more shipments were already en route or staged for export. Amelia stared at the operation points now dominating her office wall. A web of names, transit points, auction houses, and laundering nodes. At its heart remained the question: who was orchestrating this strategy? Who had engineered the use of cultural sensitivity as a shield and chemically enhanced forgery as a sword? Blaze shifted at her feet, ears twitching. Amelia knew they had pierced the network's veil, but behind it, more layers waited to be unraveled. Amelia sat in the operations room surrounded by a flurry of activity. The chemical alerts triggered by Blaze had opened the floodgates, and now enforcement agencies across both the US and Europe were unearthing layers of the trafficking network. Yet one question still burned at the center of the case: Nathan Greyhawk. His role seemed more complex than that of a simple courier. Amelia's instincts told her he wasn't just complicit, he was compromised. When the Fusion Center's latest deep dive report landed on her desk, it provided the first real clarity. Nathan's digital footprint had revealed an alarming pattern. Over the past year, he had accessed multiple dark web marketplaces known for trafficking in illicit antiquities. His activity had begun innocently enough, browsing forums dedicated to native arts and cultural preservation. But at some point, the line had blurred. Financial analysis painted a grim picture. Nathan had accrued significant debt through a crypto-based peer-to-peer lending scheme, a front operated by a known laundering collective. The evidence was damning. Multiple wallet transactions tied him to repayments linked to artifact trafficking nodes. Serrano's analysts confirmed what Amelia had feared. Nathan was a debtor trapped in a cycle of coercion. He had initially borrowed cryptocurrency through what he believed was an arts grant fund offering microloans to emerging native artists. The fund had instead been a baited trap operated through a darknet escrow service controlled by the trafficking network. When Nathan missed a repayment milestone, the threats began. The logs recovered from his private encrypted chat client were chilling. Messages from an anonymous handler demanded that he work off his debt through logistical assistance. The handler had provided detailed instructions on preparing shipments, recruiting couriers, and laundering documents. Nathan had balked, but the coercion intensified. The chats referenced direct threats to both him and his family. Amelia shared the findings with Monroe and Serrano in an emergency briefing. "He's not a mastermind. He's a pawn, one they forced to play this role under threat." Serrano nodded grimly. "And he's still in play somewhere, which makes him both a target and a potential source if we can reach him first." "That thread just got clearer," Amelia replied. Facial recognition and financial analysis had linked the courier who handed the Greyhawk's box to a known trafficking facilitator, Julian Marchand, a French national operating under multiple aliases. Marchand specialized in recruiting vulnerable couriers from marginalized communities. His network had a signature pattern: target groups with deep cultural pride but limited economic opportunity, elderly native artisans, young scholarship students, cultural program volunteers. The offer was always couched in the language of empowerment. Partake in your culture with the world. Participate in prestigious European exhibitions. Earn travel stipends and showcase traditional art. In reality, Marchand's recruits became unwitting transporters of smuggled artifacts. The same pattern had appeared in the prior 6 courier cases. In one, a 73-year-old Navajo silversmith had been convinced to carry what he thought were samples of his own craft to a Berlin show. In another, a 20-year-old student on a cultural exchange visa had been intercepted in Madrid, carrying a suitcase lined with forged documents and high-value jewelry. Amelia's stomach twisted with each case file she reviewed. The network wasn't just exploiting legal loopholes. It was manipulating trust, honor, and pride to shield its crimes. Serrano reported that Marchand's recruitment tactics were spreading rapidly through native online art communities. They're using fake nonprofits, fake grant programs, and they're embedding operatives into community art fairs, he said. We've identified at least 4 suspected front organizations funneling couriers into this pipeline. Amelia asked, "What's the link between Marchand and Nathan?" Serrano explained. Nathan was pulled in after responding to a supposed grant offer posted through one of Marchand's fronts. His debt ensnared him, and they leveraged it brutally. He was instructed to use trusted family contacts to launder shipments, people whose profiles fit the pattern we've seen. Monroe's face hardened, and his parents were the perfect target: respected elders, no criminal record, natural deference at security checks. Amelia nodded. They were used, as have others. The trafficking network is institutionalizing this model. They're not relying on traditional smuggling routes anymore. They're engineering cultural camouflage. She tapped the table. We need to flip the script. If we can turn Nathan, he can give us the operational hierarchy. Marchand's network, the European buyers, the forgers. Serrano agreed. But time's critical. If the network suspects Nathan is exposed, they'll cut him loose or worse. Amelia pulled Blaze's leash and stood. Then we find him first. An alert chimed on her phone. Fusion Center tracking had triangulated Nathan's burner phone to a transient signal near a native arts cooperative outside Santa Fe. The location fit. Nathan's last refuge was among the very community his traffickers had manipulated. Amelia keyed her radio. "Mobilize now. We're going after his..." The hunt was on. As Amelia's team mobilized to locate Nathan Greyhawk, the ripple effects of the operation were spreading far beyond Albuquerque. In Washington, the State Department had just received a formal diplomatic note from the government of Peru. The note, transmitted via Peru's embassy, cited the mounting evidence of fraudulent excavation certificates traced to illicit antiquities appearing in European markets. It formally requested U.S. assistance in dismantling the laundering networks responsible for legitimizing these artifacts. The language was pointed. Given the substantial volume of Peruvian cultural property being trafficked through U.S. transit points, the note read, and the involvement of U.S.-based actors in document forgery and logistical support, we urge immediate and coordinated enforcement action. The note also referenced the recent seizures at Chicago and Miami, as well as the intercepted Greyhawk shipment, which had now been publicized through international enforcement bulletins. Amelia reviewed the cable as it was forwarded through the Interagency Cultural Heritage Protection Task Force. Serrano briefed her on the diplomatic implications. Peru's government is under intense domestic pressure. There have been protests over the loss of national heritages, and the Greyhawk case gave them the evidence to go public. This note is their opening move. Amelia nodded grimly, and it's going to force a high-level response. We can't afford to mishandle this, not with tribal communities watching how we deal with their own exploited heritage. The urgency of that point became crystal clear when a second development landed on Amelia's desk. A prominent US-based NGO, the Indigenous Cultural Rights Alliance, ICRA, issued a scathing public statement condemning the trafficking network's exploitation of native ceremonial protections. The statement, widely picked up in media outlets, accused transnational criminal organizations of weaponizing the sacred trust placed in native elders and cultural practitioners to launder stolen artifacts. It went further, calling out the systemic failure of enforcement agencies and cultural institutions to recognize and address the emerging threat. For too long, the statement read, "Our communities have been viewed solely as victims of artifact theft. Now we are being used as unwitting instruments of cultural erasure. We demand immediate action to dismantle these networks and safeguard the integrity of our sacred traditions." The statement resonated deeply within Native communities and drew swift political attention. Several tribal councils issued supportive declarations, and members of Congress began drafting letters demanding oversight hearings. Amelia understood the stakes. The perception that enforcement might criminalize vulnerable couriers rather than target the architects of the scheme had to be decisively countered. She quickly organized a joint call with ICRA leadership, Monroe and Serrano. During the call, Amelia laid out the task force's strategy. "We are fully committed to disrupting this network at its source," she said. "Our investigation is focused on the traffickers, the forgers, and the recruiters. We view the couriers, elders, students as victims of exploitation. We will not treat them as criminals." ICE's executive director, a respected Navajo cultural scholar named Dr. Ayana Nez, responded with cautious approval. "This is the message our communities need to hear," she said. "But it must be backed by transparent action. Too many times, promises of cultural sensitivity have been followed by punitive measures against our people." Amelia assured her, "We will engage tribal liaison officers at every stage, and we welcome your partnership in community outreach to prevent further exploitation." The alignment with ICRA was both a moral imperative and a strategic necessity. Their involvement provided the operation with cultural legitimacy and helped shield it from accusations of insensitivity or overreach. It also created a powerful counter-narrative, Native communities leading the charge against the very networks seeking to exploit them. Meanwhile, the diplomatic front intensified. The State Department requested a detailed briefing from TSA, CBP, and HSI on the scope of U.S. involvement and enforcement actions underway. Amelia and Monroe prepared a joint report highlighting the seizure data, the chemical signature breakthrough enabled by Blaze, and the international alerts now in effect. They emphasized that the U.S. was treating the network as a priority transnational organized crime threat, with ongoing collaboration with Peruvian and European authorities. Serrano added an important intelligence update. "We've intercepted chatter indicating the European buyer networks are spooked. The Frankfurt Fair is now under scrutiny, and several planned shipments have been canceled or rerouted." Amelia saw the opportunity. "We can exploit that disruption. With ICRA's help, we can warn communities targeted for recruitment, starve the traffickers of couriers, and tighten the enforcement net." Monroe agreed. "And we use the diplomatic leverage Peru's request gives us to push for stronger European cooperation, especially in breaking the auction house cover." As the diplomatic gears turned, Amelia kept her focus razor-sharp on the operational front. A new Fusion Center report landed in her inbox. Another disturbing piece of the puzzle. Financial analysis had linked funds from European buyers not only to the known forgery rings but to shell charities claiming to support Native education and cultural exchange. These sham entities served dual purposes: laundering proceeds and grooming potential couriers through fake scholarship and travel programs. Amelia's hands clenched. The layers of deceit were staggering. She forwarded the findings to Dr. Nez, who responded swiftly. "We will alert our networks. No legitimate Native scholarship or exchange program would operate through such opaque channels." The partnership with ICRA was already bearing fruit. Together, they began drafting a public advisory warning tribal communities about the fraudulent programs. Amelia coordinated with tribal liaisons to ensure the message would be delivered in trusted voices and culturally appropriate format. As she finalized the advisory draft, her phone buzzed an encrypted message from Serrano. "We've located Nathan Greyhawk." Amelia's pulse quickened. The hunt was entering its next phase. The message from Serrano arrived late in the evening. Nathan Greyhawk had been located at the Arts Cooperative outside Santa Fe, exactly as the Fusion Center had predicted. Amelia and the Joint Task Force had moved swiftly, surrounding the location with a coordinated, low-visibility operation designed to minimize risk and avoid alarming the surrounding community. When agents approached, Nathan surrendered without resistance. He was gaunt, exhausted, and visibly terrified. Under interrogation, conducted with legal counsel and cultural liaison present, Nathan provided a full confession. The details confirmed the task force's analysis. He had fallen into debt through a fraudulent arts grant on the dark web, and had been coerced into recruiting trusted couriers to transport documents and artifacts for the network. The threats against his family had driven him to use his parents as the latest couriers, a choice that now weighed heavily on him. Nathan expressed deep remorse, fully cooperated with investigators, and agreed to testify against the network in exchange for leniency. His cooperation proved invaluable, helping map the hierarchy of the trafficking organization and identify key facilitators, including Julian Marchand and several European buyers. Meanwhile, the Greyhawks remained at the center of the human side of the investigation. From the outset, Amelia and Monroe had advocated for a compassionate approach. The evidence was clear. Samuel and Elena Greyhawk had been manipulated, not complicit. Following thorough interviews and background checks, federal prosecutors agreed to grant them immunity from prosecution. The announcement was delivered personally by Amelia, accompanied by Dr. Ayana Nez, to ensure transparency and cultural sensitivity. The meeting was held in a quiet conference room at the airport, away from the media frenzy now surrounding the case. Samuel and Elena listened intently as Amelia explained their legal status and the important role they could play moving forward. "You are not under investigation," Amelia assured them. "You are victims in this scheme, but we do need your help to ensure that those responsible are brought to justice." With quiet dignity, Samuel agreed. "We will do what we can. No other elder should be used this way." In a subsequent controlled lineup, both Samuel and Elena identified Julian Marchand from surveillance footage and photographs. Their testimony became a cornerstone of the case against him, providing direct evidence of his role in the courier recruitment pipeline. The Greyhawks' decision to step forward publicly also had a powerful cultural impact. With the guidance of ICRA, they participated in a community forum where they shared their experience, warning others about the manipulative tactics used by the network. Their story resonated widely, empowering other communities to be vigilant and cautious when approached by similar fronts. As the operational tempo eased, Amelia turned her attention to an often overlooked piece of the puzzle: Blaze. The K-9's extraordinary alert on the Greyhawks box had been the catalyst for the entire operation's breakthrough. His detection of the ammonium chloride and UV-reactive compounds, substances not part of his original detection training, had opened a new frontier in K-9 capabilities. Recognizing this, Monroe pushed for formal recognition. At a ceremony held in the TSA's K-9 Operations Center, Blaze was awarded an internal commendation for exceptional service. The citation highlighted his critical role in detecting and disrupting an international cultural property trafficking network through extraordinary sensitivity to emerging chemical indicators. The event was modest but heartfelt. Handlers and agents from across the department attended, with Blaze receiving a custom-fitted service vest emblazoned with a new patch recognizing his achievement. Amelia stood proudly by his side, scratching behind his ears as cameras clicked. But the ceremony was not purely symbolic. Monroe announced a significant policy shift. Based on the success of this operation, we will expand K-9 detection protocols to include emerging chemical markers associated with document forgery and artifact laundering. Blaze's work has shown us that with the right training, our K-9 units can be a powerful frontline defense against this evolving threat. A new training module was promptly developed, incorporating lessons from the Greyhawk case. Blaze's handler profile and detection logs became reference materials for future K-9 teams, ensuring that his pioneering work would inform and strengthen the next generation of detection dogs. As the weeks unfolded, the legal case progressed rapidly. With Nathan Greyhawk's testimony and the Greyhawks' identifications, authorities secured multiple indictments against Julian Marchand and key European buyers. Several fake non-profit fronts were dismantled, and European law enforcement executed coordinated raids on auction houses and storage facilities linked to the laundering pipeline. The diplomatic front advanced in parallel. U.S.-Peru cooperation deepened, with joint task forces now established to pursue cross-border trafficking leads. ICRA's advocacy ensured that tribal communities were integral partners in the ongoing enforcement and prevention efforts. For Amelia, the operation had been transformative. It had begun with a single canine alert on a seemingly innocuous ceremonial box and evolved into a complex, multinational pursuit of justice. It had exposed the vulnerabilities traffickers exploited and highlighted the critical importance of cultural sensitivity and partnership. Most importantly, it had reinforced the profound responsibility she and her colleagues bore to protect not just the letter of the law but the spirit of the communities they served. Late one evening, as she prepared to finally leave the office, Amelia paused by Blaze's kennel. The German Shepherd lay curled on his mat, eyes half closed but ears twitching at her approach. She knelt beside him, resting a hand on his strong shoulders. "You did good, boy," she whispered. Blaze gave a soft chuff, nuzzling her palm. In that quiet moment, amidst the whirlwind of global headlines and ongoing investigations, Amelia allowed herself a rare smile. They had made a difference, and tomorrow they would be ready to do it again. If this story resonated with you, I'd love for you to show your support. Hit like and subscribe so you won't miss more stories like this one. Which part of the investigation surprised you the most? Was it the way the network exploited cultural trust, or the role Blaze played in uncovering the scheme? And where are you watching from today? I'm always curious to know where these stories are reaching. Leave a comment below and let's talk about it.